Simon, you cannot help but tune into what is going on at Watford. Watford, owned by the Pozzo families. And again, we asked cheekily at the top of the show today, are there three certainties in life? Death, taxes, and a Watford managerial sacking, the latest of which is a man you rate. And I've met Valérien Ismaël, sacked at the weekend following Saturday's 2-1 home defeat by Coventry. So what does it mean for Watford? The result leaves them 14th in the Championship, 7 points above the relegation zone. He was appointed in May. He signed a contract extension, would you believe it, as recently as October. 41 games in charge. Watford won 12, lost 15, 14 draws. He was the 20th managerial appointment under the Pozzo family. And Tom Cleverley is in there now. I mean, what do you think of the way they go about it, the Pozzos? 20 managers, is that a bigger feeling of the owners, the Pozzos, than it is of the coaches who were given the tin tack?
Both, I think, isn't it? I think if you go and work for them, then you are, I would imagine, pretty clear what the expectation of you is. And whilst I like Valérien Ismaël, and I liked his performance at Barnsley, and I like the way he conducted himself, subsequent to that, he's run aground, hasn't he? He ran aground at West Bromwich Albion, and he's run aground at Watford. He's got two decent jobs with two decent clubs that have been in the Premier League in recent years and have Premier League aspirations, and produced outcomes that have been disappointing. So one has to characterise it based upon the coach's form. If you win 12 games out of 41, you've got a 30% win record. That's not going to keep you in a job. Now, people can say, well, you should be given longer. But the criteria for managing Watford, whether you like it or you don't, is you have to hit the ground running. You have to be able to achieve outcomes that vaguely meet the expectations of the owners. And if you don't do that, you're going to get fired, and they're going to have wasted their time and potentially yours. And that's the nature of the beast. And some would say it's an awful way to run a football club. Some Watford fans will ring in and say it's awful what they've done to our football club. And other people will say you've been in the Premier League for 40% of the last decade, and other clubs that have been far more significant in English football have not. Yeah, but Forest, Sheffield Wednesday being cases in point.
But you don't need to be a genius to look at it and think, well, the one thing Watford don't have, seldom have, is stability.
What is stability then? Employing the wrong people to keep on doing the wrong jobs?
No, so how about they get it right for once?
Well, it depends what you categorise as getting right. You know, again,
someone that stays in the job for a lengthy period of time.
You make the argument that stability.
Let's go for him. No, not him. Let's try him. We haven't tried him yet. Let's go for him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with the principle that it is better to have somebody in a job for a period of time because it maintains continuity. But stability, if stability means going in the wrong direction, if stability means keep Valérien Ismaël in a job winning 30% of the games because you're going to stay in the Championship, if that's your version of stability, then okay, it has stability attached to it. It doesn't have any achievement attached to it. It doesn't have any aspiration attached to it. It doesn't have any outcomes that might meet the expectations of the ownership, which wants to be in the Premier League. But yes, it has stability.
No, I agree with you. But you could also look at it from this point of view. Recruitment. How come Watford get it so miserably wrong on such a regular basis?
Well, it depends who you're comparing Watford to.
A club that gets it right. And somebody who stays in position.
Okay, well, there's only a few
and
of those.
Gives them stability.
There's only a few
if you're a manager, you're going to look at Watford and say to the Pozzos, thanks.
But they don't, do they?
But no thanks.
But they don't, because there's a regular supply of managers who will take that job. So that argument is constantly, negated by the fact that people take the job. So if you're going to compare Watford to teams that are in the Premier League and compare them by that standard and suggest that Watford have a God-given right to be in the Premier League, then yes, they're probably not running it very well. If you're going to compare them to other football clubs that have been in the Premier League, other football clubs like Ipswich that have been out of the Premier League for 22 years, or Sheffield Wednesday that have been out of the Premier League for 25 years, or Nottingham Forest that are out of the Premier League, European Cup winners Nottingham Forest that have been out of the Premier League for 23 years. And you look at Leeds United that have been in the Premier League, arguably one of the biggest clubs in English football for 2 or 3 seasons out of the last 20. And say, well, how badly are Watford doing with this awful regime of hiring and firing these poor devils that are managers that are often getting paid to fail?
It
depends what prism you look through it at.
They could do better, couldn't they?
Again,
they could do better.
By conventional wisdom, by the orthodoxy of you must hire a manager and you must suffer him for as long as you can suffer him under the auspice of stability.
So they had Roy Hodgson, they had Chris Wilder, Valérien Ismaël,
and they did
how
rubbish.
About the recruitment department saying, here's a guy who's going to be a surefire winner.
Well, I'm sure they start from that position.
Honestly,
I'm
going to hang my hat in it. It's going to be a surefire way. How difficult is that to achieve?
They do start from the position of not wanting someone to fail.
And give them time.
It would be a very strange situation where the Watford owners interview them and say, I do hope you're going to fail so I can fire you quickly. More likely they go in with the optimism that ultimately...
I'm not saying that. You know I'm not saying that.
Because I think a lot of these football managers are bloody pretenders. I think they're the emperor's new clothes. I think they sit there telling you that they're going to do something, they get in a job and do precisely the polar opposite, right, and blame everybody else for it.
Is that what happened to you?
It has happened to me, yeah.
Oh,
and it's happened to lots of other football clubs as well.
I'm glad it happened to you.
If you get somebody in a door, right, and you say to them, say, we're Watford, right? Do you know what we do, don't we? We fire people like you if you don't do your jobs. Would you like the job? Yeah. Are you going to be effective in the job? Have you had a look at the playing squad? Do you know what we've got? Do you know what our expectations are? I've not got a shepherd's hook and lassoing, pulling you in the door, am I? You want to do this job knowing the circumstances, right? So if you produce me a 30% win record, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're going to get fired.
I get that.
And then you're going to blame everybody else for it. But I brought you in. I've got a problem. I keep firing managers because they don't do their jobs. Do you want to be another part of that problem, or do you want to be the solution?
So how and when do they get it right?
Again, by what prism? If you think...
Forget your prism.
If you think
it's a straightforward question. Look at it through the prism of this. How and when do they get it right?
Comparison to whom? To Palace? Or to West Ham?
Get
or
someone
to
who
Brentford?
lasts quite a number of seasons and is successful. The obligation is on them to do that.
And then have them have banners put up in the stands like Roy Hodgson. You know, get out of our club, you're too old. Right? And you don't make decisions, you don't know what you're doing. So all you're doing is short-circuiting it. I do get that it can't be ideal for anybody to have a consistent revolving door of managers coming in and out. But the fact of the matter is the playing squad don't change, do they? Look at this time last year. We had my friend Chris Wilder over at Watford telling everybody how awful they were over there and what the players were and giving you a proper rendition of what the awful circumstances were. And yet a year later, we had a series of managers come in that do no better. Maybe if they do their jobs better, it would stop the Pozzos being so trigger-happy. Maybe that. Maybe you have a look down there and see, honestly, how many of those Watford managers did we go, oh, that's bloody unfair?
Okay. So it's 20 managers in 12 years, but for God's sake, don't blame the Pozzos.
No, blame them too, because they're the ones that of course you've got to blame them.
Oh, hallelujah.
But what you're saying is that Watford have a God-given right to be in the Premier League and judged by it. They're in the Championship, right? There are bigger clubs like Derby County and Charlton, not bigger, but certainly comparable, that are languishing in League One. Sunderland, League One for 3 years. These clubs were Premier League football clubs. Judge Watford by those standards, and all of a sudden, Watford are a considered success.
Well, you're preaching to the converted, and Matt and Milton Keynes, as a lifelong Watford fan of 38 years, I have no issue with the current plan. We have a model of head coach. They coach the best players we can attract who can offer longer-term sell-on value. If there's a clear underperformance in coaching and playing, then someone new needs to come in. We've hired great managers over the last 4 years. Rob Edwards, clearly a great manager, but he couldn't make it work with us. Matt in Milton Keynes.
See, there's the flaw in the argument, isn't there? Because Rob Edwards sashayed off, sauntered off to Luton and got them promoted. So there's the argument you could raise.
Yes.
Someone gave it to you and you still didn't grab it.
No, I got it.
You could have been weaponising it and throwing it back at me. But what about Rob Edwards?
I wanted you to round it off. Anyway, the Pozzos can do no wrong, says trigger happy one-time owner Simon Jordan.
More of them, I think.
Bracket 60.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.